Hey there. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Cerise here. Welcome to Story Time. I'm located right now in a town called Sosua, in a province called Puerto Plata, in the country, the island of the Dominican Republic. I live in a little neighborhood called Los Cheramicos. If you're ever by, come stop by. I'd like to meet you. Well, guys, this story time is another one with twists and turns. I was very surprised, at what this main character is going through, what he said he's going through right now. Okay, so let's just get to the whole meat of the matter. You know how we do it. We do the background of each person. Okay, so there's three main characters involved. There's a man, we're going to name him Robbie. Then there is his wife, we will name her Mia. Then there is the other one, the daughter, and we will name her Cinderella, just for the lack of a better name. Okay, so you have Cinderella, Mia, and you have Robbie. Robbie is chilling out. He's sitting in his buddy's basement, construction worker guy back in the day. At this point, he was 28 years old. He's known his buddy for 2 years. His buddy was also 28 years old. Both of them were doing apprenticeship in construction, and they really liked each other. They were hanging out, right? But they didn't really get into each other's family business or what was going on. All he knew is that his buddy was living with his mom. Well, one night he met his buddy's sister, and this sister was an older sister by 10 years. Okay, this sister, Mia, she was raised by her father, and she wasn't raised with Robbie's friend, with her brother. And so, she already had a child, and she was 38 years old and divorced. She had a 5-year-old child. So she walked down the basement stairs, and that's when they first met, her and Robbie. And Robbie said to her, "My gosh, you are who are you?" And he said to me, "Cerise." I said it straight out to her, just like that. "Oh my gosh, who are you?" Right? And she laughed, and she was like, "Aw." And she looked at him and she said, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm your new man." And they thought it was all cute, and they all laughed. And he said to me, it was kind of cliche and, cheeky, but she fell for it. And he found out it was his friend's sister. And so they all got together a lot. And he said eventually her and him started a very serious relationship. He said he didn't even feel like she was 10 years older than him, because they always had fun, and they always had a meeting of the minds. He said she was such a wonderful delight to be around. That age was really, honestly, nothing, not even a number. He said it was non-existent for him and for her as well. So 10 years, when you really think about it, is not a lot anyway, when two people can have the meeting of the minds. And so that's what they were doing. They were chilling. Well, he said about 10 years into the relationship, oh, and by the way, perfect stepfather. He said he took on her daughter, Cinderella, just like she was his own. He was only 28. She was 5. He said he figured he could be old enough to be a dad to a 5-year-old. It didn't bother him. And Cinderella was so young, she didn't know the difference in what age was. She would just know what a really good man is. And that's what he said to me. He said, "Cerise, age was really nothing. I just wanted to help this woman, love her, have her love me, because I could tell how genuine she was with her daughter. I could tell how real she was with people. And I just wanted her to be like that with me forever. I just wanted her to hold me. And in her daughter, I would transfer the same love to her daughter and the same respect." And he said, and that's what did happen, with no problem, until 10 years into the relationship. Mia was at work, and she slipped and she fell, leaving the car, going into her office, and she fell on some ice. And when she fell on ice, she hurt her back, and Then she had to go through some surgeries, and her life changed completely. She could still walk, but she had to learn how to walk again. She had to go to therapy, and she was angry at herself. She would often say to him, it was so silly. Why was she wearing heels in the middle of the wintertime, rushing to work as if work is the most important thing to her? She said it's not even like she was hit by a car or hurt by somebody else. She was hurt with stupidity. And so he said he always supported her and loved her. His love for her did not change at all, but she couldn't forgive herself, and they couldn't figure out how to get her to forgive herself. Like, she was just always blaming herself and putting herself down and paranoid about ice and just trying to heal, really. So they decided that they were going to start going to church. And once they started to attend church, it started to make her feel better. And eventually she started to go off the meds that she was on, and she started to walk better. And he felt like she was walking with faith. Now she had faith, and she had a new type of belief system. And so she was fine. She was doing good, no pills, and her back was becoming better, and she was walking with faith. And he said he couldn't believe that the same woman that fell on ice a year later could be back to normal. He said, but there was one thing that wasn't the same. She was depressed all the time. She didn't have her same job. She was trying to get some work. She was trying to get herself back to where she was a little too quickly. And she went into a deep depression. Now, he said that the first 10 years of their relationship was amazing. He said once she fell on the ice for a whole year, even more, he said, he took care of her. He was always there for her, and there was no intimacy, none at all. And he said he did not mind because he knew she was healing. He said he's not the type of man that can't go please himself. So he said he would never even ask her for anything. And, he would always kiss her on her forehead, always make her feel loved. But she went into a depression. And he said even though she could walk, even though she could make love, even though she could do all those things again, she wasn't doing it with him. And he said now he was yearning the affection. He felt like she was being selfish because she was forgetting who he was, how affectionate he was, and how their first 10 years were. And he said to me, Cerise, you know what? I just felt so cheated. I felt like I took care of her after she slipped, and I made every single beck and call about her. And then here she is better, not even taking pain pills any longer, and can't even make love once in a while. A little intimacy, hold my hand, touch me. He said she wouldn't even do that. She grew so far apart from him, she wasn't even appreciating what he gave her. The time, the patience, the support. She forgot to reciprocate that. But none of us should be surprised by that, because he said she's depressed. For some people, depression can be crippling. So chances are she was crippled by the pain of her life changing so much. She was trying to make it work. And he said that they were still going to church every weekend, and they were helping out during the week at church, and church was a big part of their lives. And he said at this point he didn't mind, because it was a great way to meet people, and he was, really finding a lot of networking people, and he was still into construction, but now he owned his own construction business and doing very well on his own with her brother, his buddy from the beginning. They opened up their own business, and they're doing very, very well financially. So now he was getting a lot of people. He was even helping to fix the church up, restore other churches. And he said life was really good, even though the intimacy had stopped for 5 years. He said when she was healing and she was like on crutches and she had a cane, there were times where she really wanted to be pleased, and he would please her. He said that was his woman. He would please her. He had no problem with it. And, she would try to please him too as best she could. But he said he had no problem doing what he could go do in the bathroom. Or, she would watch movies with him or whatever. And he said they had a wonderful interaction. But once she got depressed, he said that was all done with. He said she could walk, she could talk, she could do everything fine. She wasn't rehabilitating her body any longer. She wasn't rehabilitating anything physically. But yet she still wasn't giving him any intimacy for 5 years. He ended up cheating on her. Now, when he cheated on her, it was with one of the women of the church. Clearly, that's where he's spending most of his time, with one of the women of the church. Now, she didn't care. The wife didn't care. Mia said, well, my husband has needs, and I forgive him. That's what she said. And it made him feel like, wow, there was not even any counseling they could go through. He said to me, Cerise, I was at least expecting her to cry about that, because she cried about the tiniest thing and she had everything. I made sure she had everything. And she was sad about what? He said nothing. She was just sad. She had her life. She was rehabilitated. She had everything to live for. And she had a wonderful daughter. She had a wonderful husband, beautiful home. And she just couldn't shake the funk. And he said, well, when I cheated, I thought, I'm doing it. And he said, I can't help myself. And he said, I wasn't even really attracted to the woman. And he said, and that's probably one of the problems, because Mia didn't think the woman was probably attractive either. She probably knew it was just a desire that I had for intimacy. And I was like, wow, and he's like, yeah, and she forgave me immediately. I told her I wanted to go to counseling, but she said no. And we know why she said no. It could be. Well, we don't know why, but most likely it's because she didn't want to confront her own demons. She didn't want to have to talk about herself. And so she was not willing to go to counseling. She said they can get over it. They don't need to tell anyone their problems. They'll just take them to God. And yes, that does work too. Not everybody needs to go to counseling. Some of us do need to just forget and forgive and move on. Not make a big deal out of certain things. Especially if for 5 years she didn't give him intimacy, right? She knows that any man is going to break at some point. Then he breaks with somebody who's not even a superstar or someone that he would want to leave her for. She knows that he only got weak. So, it got to a point where he started to feel disgusted within himself that she forgave him so easily. And she could still sleep in the same bed beside him, but not touch him, not want him, not even understand that he needed affection. And he said to me, Cerise, I started to pray for God to take her. I started to pray for her to go. She always prayed for that. And he said some days we'd be in the car after church going home, and she'd be like, I prayed for God to take me today. And I'd look at her and be like, that's not even a normal prayer. I wouldn't say it to her, but I would just say to her, oh, come on, baby, you don't want to go. We have Cinderella. We have our beautiful home. And she would say these material things are nothing to her. And I respected that, and I loved that, is what he said to me. But you know what? He also said to me, Cerise, I feel like the woman just maybe had too much pain inside of her to have any type of appreciation for the blessings that were outside of her. He said, I felt like I was just praying to God, just take her. Take her. I couldn't see a change for her. And he said, I started to pray to God, I can't leave her. How am I going to leave her? She's a sick woman, and I appreciate her. I understand why she's sick, but my life can't go on like this. Please, God. That's what he prayed to God for her to leave, for God to take her. Well, God answered his prayers, but in a different way. God told her something. So he said they were on their way home from church one day, and she said to him, God told me to release you. And he said, Cerise, I almost pressed the brake so hard so I could hear it again. He said, but I heard it and my heart started to beat quickly. And I said to her, God said that? And she said, yes, God said to me that I should release you, that you've done all you can for me. You love me, but you need to have a life as well. Because his life was all about her sickness. And he said to her, okay, if this is what you want. And she said, it's what God wants. He said, okay. He said to me, Cerise, you know what I did? There's a restaurant that everyone goes to eat from every single day after church. Every single time we go to church, there's one restaurant we go to that sells the best lunch because everyone gets there by 11:30. He says they sell the best lunch and we always take the biggest table. There's a bunch of us. He said, so that day I dropped my wife and her sister off. It's like her sister that she just calls a sister. And he said, I dropped them off and I told them I'll be right back. And Mia looked at me and said, well, where are you going? And he said, there's something I got to do. I'll be right back, Mia. So Mia said, okay. He said he went home and packed up close to 2 decades of his life. Okay? He said close to 2 decades of his life. He went from room to room, and he said it was the easiest thing to do because he thinks in the last 5 years, he was already downsizing his stuff. He had bought a little shop, not bought a shop, he had rented a little shop where he had a hobby shop with his construction, his tools and everything. So he had no tools in the house at all. He said he was afraid to have tools there anyway because he was afraid she would kill herself with one of the tools in the shed. So he took all of his tools to like a rental place that he had, like, you know how you can rent places for storage? Well, he had his in there and he'd go there and do a lot of, woodworking, he said, and different things for construction. And plus he had a business with her brother where they had a lot of things as well. So, he said he hardly had anything in the house. It was just a few ties, underwear, socks in the bedroom, a couple of colognes. He said he wasn't really big on too many clothes. Most of his clothes were work clothes. And he said then he went into the bathroom. There was nothing there of his, just a shaver. He said he went downstairs into the basement. He thought she could have the whole entire man cave. He was like, there was TV, sound system and everything. He thought if she doesn't want it, then she can pack everything up or he can send someone over to get the stuff, or her daughter could have it. Right? But her daughter was living there full time at this point. Her daughter was out on her own doing her own thing. Right? So he said he packed everything up. It took him an hour to pack it up. Hour and a half tops, right? And he said then he got back to the restaurant. He had everything in the back of his truck. He said he had one of those trucks where it's like a construction truck, but you can fit 3 people in the back and 2 people in the front. And then you have your big cab in the back. He said, well, he had like a nice cab in the back, and he said he was surprised at how little he had. He packed everything up, put it in the truck, and then he went back to the restaurant. He said he wasn't giving her a moment to change her mind. And I don't blame him. He wasn't giving her a moment to change her mind. He went into the restaurant, and when he got into the restaurant, everyone was still eating, and his plate was right there because she knew what he ordered every Sunday. And it was covered over, and he sat down. He said he had the last breakfast with her instead of the last dinner. He said he had the last breakfast with her, and the last supper. He felt like it was. He said he felt like he was born again. Now, after the breakfast, he went back to the house with her, and he sat in the parking lot with her, like he said the carport, and he looked at her and he said, Mia, I'd like to thank you for what you said today about God saying that you should release me. I am going to accept that offer. And Mia looked at him. He said she looked down into her hands. She looked back into his eyes. And she said, I can't keep you here. And he said, okay. And he left that night. Now, he said it took him about 6 months to get himself back on track. He said it took him 6 months. And then he started to date again. And then he went out on a date. And he could never believe what happened on this date. I can't believe what happened on this date. What his daughter did. Oh, his stepdaughter. Okay, let me get to the basics of what happened. There's going to be a part 2, and I apologize, but this is what happened. So he goes on a dating site, and he finally meets a woman that, he felt like, okay, I'm going to go out with her. I'm going to go and treat her to something really nice. So they decided on a restaurant. He told the woman, pick a restaurant. And the woman picked this swanky restaurant in downtown. Now, he heard of this restaurant before from his stepdaughter. Before him and Mia broke up, the stepdaughter told him to take Mia out to a restaurant, try to break the monotony. But Mia wouldn't go. And he wanted to go to the restaurant because the stepdaughter made it sound so good and delicious, and he really wanted to go. She showed him the website. She showed him the food and how it's so gourmet, and he loved different restaurants, and he was begging Mia to go. And Mia was like, no. She said she didn't have anything to wear. She was too depressed. She was too sad. And so he didn't go. When this date had mentioned the restaurant, he was like, well, why not? Why not go? Guess who else went? That exact same night, the stepdaughter. Now, the stepdaughter and him for 6 months were not talking very much at all. The stepdaughter was blaming him, saying that he didn't try hard enough with her mother and that he needed to just try harder. And she couldn't believe that the mother said one time in their whole relationship that he can go, and he was just out of there. He didn't even wait. He tried to explain to her over and over how it was difficult for him to be in a relationship with her mother. But of course, she didn't understand. She loved both of them very much and wanted to see them together. So she was very angry at him and disconnected from him. He didn't hear from her for a few months. And then he saw her at the restaurant, and she was out of sorts. So this is what happened. He said, Cerise, I was sitting at the table with my date. We were really getting it on. He said, at first I picked her up from her condo. She was just as pretty in person as she was online. And she grabbed my hand immediately as we were driving in the car. I felt so safe driving just with one hand, holding her other hand. He said it was just beautiful. And he said, I couldn't explain how we had an instant connection. And he said, I was sitting at the table with her. We're giggling back and forth, both looking into each other's eyes. And then all of a sudden I look up. He said, just my energy, something told me, look up. He said, I looked up and I saw my stepdaughter coming towards the table. He said, I can't tell you how much weight she put on. It was just so different seeing her, and I didn't recognize her at first. She came directly over to the table. She yelled at me, and she called me an old geezer because the girl I was with was a little younger. And by maybe 15 years, 10 years. She wasn't younger, but she wasn't as young as my daughter. But my daughter called me an old geezer and told me that I needed to go home. And then she picked up the wine glass that the woman had in her hand, grabbed it from the woman, dumped out the glass all over the woman. She then smashed off the top of the wine glass so it was more like a stem with just kind of prickles sticking out of it, with like glass crystals sticking out of it. Nothing looking like a glass, a stem of a wine glass. She stuck it into the forehead of my date and said, "That's what you get for being a home wrecker," and turned around and walked away. Now, what was I supposed to do? I immediately called her mother, immediately called the police, and she was arrested. Of course, her and her mother blame it on me. Her mom blames it on me because her mom feels I should not have called the police. Her mom feels I should have just pretended like I didn't even know who she was and just act like she's some crazy woman coming into the restaurant to stab my date in the forehead with a wine glass stem. What? No way. She deserved some type of punishment. You don't do that to people. And I'm sure that a lot of you would agree with him. I'm looking forward to your comments. I really am. Right now, he's still dealing with that situation. He said that he can't wait to get down here to the Dominican Republic. He said this is where he really loves to be. He says for him, here, there's no drama. For him, here, he's happy, he's content, he's relaxed, he can breathe, and this is where he wants to come. He can't wait to come here. So I just want to say to you guys, thank you so much for pressing that thumbs up key, that button, for liking this video. I need to know what you like that I upload. And thank you so much also for subscribing if you already haven't. Alrighty guys, take care, big blesses, huge hugs, and loads of love. Thank you for watching Storytime.